All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Many of you might have seen that when Jenny was on with us last time, like a month ago, we had some technical issues and our entire office lost power. So that was fun. So Jenny is back with us today, and we're really excited to have her for our Plunge into Tech webinar series. If any of you are joining us for the first time, welcome. And just so you know, this is a series of absolutely free webinars that we've been doing with a lot of our technology authors to help you stay up to speed over the summer and learn some tips and tricks for the new school year, which is starting very, very soon. The last week's webinar with Kathleen McClaskey, it is still on Corwin Connect, which is our blog. And so we hope you take a look there and watch that if you didn't already see it. Some other things to just keep in mind during the webinar, we're using the Plunge into Tech hashtag on Twitter. That's where we'll be monitoring questions and comments. So we'll make sure that everyone's questions are answered there at some point, if not during the webinar, then after. We're also giving away the entire Corwin Connected Educator series to 3 lucky recipients. We've gotten a lot of entries in our contest. So if you share a great idea that you have for using technology in the classroom, using the Plunge into Tech hashtag, and get lots of likes on it, then you will be entered to win. It's pretty simple. And then last thing, just be sure to stick around to the end of the webinar so that you can download your certificate of completion. And I think that's about it. So just to introduce Jenny again, for those of you who don't know, Jenny is the Chief Technology Officer for Des Plaines School District 62. She is a White House Champion for Change, Apple Distinguished Educator, Google for Education Certified Innovator, and TEDx speaker. And she is the author of Courageous Edventures, which is publishing next month. And we're really excited to see that. So thank you again, Jenny, for rescheduling and for being with us again today.
Thank you. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited for the functional internet today. It was really funny because when it happened last time, you know, Ariel and I, we couldn't figure out what was going on, but then I talked to some friends who live near the Corwin offices in California, and they were like, no, it's like the entire southern part of the state was gone. So thanks for having me on. And today we also have my 4-month-old puppy, Lucky, on too. Because if not, she'll be crying in the background the entire time. So Lucky's my co-pilot for this adventure, and we'll just be hanging out here. But I'm very excited to be talking today about how you can dive into innovation in your school this year. It's been something I've been thinking a lot about, both as an educator but also as an author. As Ariel said, I'm finishing up writing up Courageous Adventures. The final copy edit went into the editor yesterday, so I'm super pumped about getting to share that with all of you. And I'm going to be talking about some of the ideas that I wrote about in the book today and give you guys some tips on how to dig into innovation on your own in your classrooms, or if you're a coach or an administrator, someone who supports teachers, a parent. There's a lot of tips in there for you as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can say bye to Lucky for now. Bye. And we're going to share the presentation. As Ariel said, you can go ahead and follow along on Twitter using the hashtag #PlungeIntoTech. However, additionally, another way that you can ask questions is by going to this URL at the top. And what I'm modeling today is a newer feature in Google Slides. There's a feature in Google Slides called Slides Q&A. And what this allows you to do is engage your audience, whether your audience are fellow teachers like yourselves, or students in your classroom, or even if you're working with a parent night at your school. You can, when you're presenting a slide deck, turn on presenter mode, and it adds this bar to the top of every single slide in your deck, and it allows the audience to ask questions in a forum. As they're asking questions, they can see the questions that other folks have asked, and they can go ahead and vote up questions that they want to see answered by the presenter. So if you want to go ahead and go to that URL, goo.gl/slides/mn4hw4. That's going to stay across the top the entire time. If you want to say hi, introduce yourself, say where you're from, or just ask any questions throughout the webinar, I'm going to be watching it on another screen here and try and answer you live to make this feel a little bit more interactive. I also wanted to share that you are able to, oops, let's see here. Are the slides, there we go. I also wanted to share that you are able to go ahead and get 25% off of the book if you're interested in purchasing it. So if you go on the Core One website, you can purchase Courageous Adventures now. It is available for pre-sale. And if you use that coupon code and is a Nancy 16678 at checkout, you're able to go ahead and save some dollars, which I know is very nice to do. So I wanted to start off today by talking about what it means to be on an adventure. And it's always really exciting to think about, you know, how we are taking every single day in our classrooms as an adventure. Sometimes it's, you know, the power going out. Other times it's an unforeseen question that a student asks. It's a left turn that a lesson takes. And sometimes the adventures are more fun than others. But it is a really great way to think about how we're teaching and working with our kiddos every day. However, there are a lot of history about adventurers back in time. And I think sometimes as we think about our classroom as an adventure, it's important for us to think about adventurers who came before us. So I love to tell the story of the ancient Polynesians. If you remember, the ancient Polynesians, thousands and thousands of years ago, were extremely successful because they were able to populate a large geographic area, larger than any historical civilization ever had a chance to, because it spanned across the entire Pacific Ocean. If you aren't aware, the early Polynesians, their ancestors started off from Taiwan, and they were able to sail across the Pacific Ocean using really primitive sailing technology. And what's amazing to me to think about isn't that only that they were able to do this, that they were able to get all the way down to Papua New Guinea, to Australia, to New Zealand, across to Hawaii, Fiji, Bora Bora, all of the lovely places that we like to vacation and honeymoon, but also the fact that they chose to do so in the first place. I mean, if you think about it, these ancient Polynesians just decided to walk up to the edge of their island and look off into the vast eastern sea of the Pacific Ocean, and all they saw was endless water. And yet someone decided one day that it would be a good idea to chop down a palm tree, create a boat, and jump into it. And I love to think about that because that's not the norm for most people. Most people don't say, hey, I see a big ocean, let me sail into it. Most people are standing at the edge of it wondering, I'm not sure about that. I could die, I could get hurt. Or they're hanging onto the palm tree thinking, oh, hell no, I don't want to go out there. This is way too terrifying. This is not for me. I am not an adventurer. And if we think about this, this isn't new. There's something called the Rogers diffusion of innovation curve. And in this, Rogers describes the different types of people you'll find in any organization. He says that the top 2.5 to 13.5%, so aggregate 16%, are your innovators, your early adopters. These are the folks who are going to jump in and do something just because it seems cool. And those are the hoorays, the people who are going to chop down the tree and jump into a boat just because the ocean is there. But then the majority of your organization, or in this case your school, are the 68% who are like, I don't know, this seems scary. They're not totally against it, but they're really hesitant. They're afraid of drowning. They're afraid of bad weather. They're afraid of all the things that could go wrong that keep them on shore and out of the boat. And then the final 16% are the people who are like, heck no, I would never do that. That's not who I am. And those are the laggards in your organization. Now, in an organization like a school, a lot of times when we're talking about innovative new concepts like digital learning, we're talking normally to that top 16%, the innovators and the early adopters. But if you look at this graph, you can see that 84% of the people who work with you are hms and heck no's, people who don't want to jump into innovation, don't want to be in digital learning, and maybe aren't on Twitter on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of the summer on a webinar like you're doing right now. So the question is, how do we convince people around us to jump on the boat? How do we get more people in our school to take risks for the benefit of our children? Or if you self-identify as a and heck no, maybe you accidentally stumbled onto this webinar, maybe you were voluntold to log in or someone else emailed this to you. How do you find the inner passion and motivation to do this? Because after all, the and heck no's, they're not bad people. They're not educators who don't care about kids or don't want to improve classrooms. They're people who feel like they can't. They can't do these things. They're not the type of people who know how to chop down a tree, build a boat, and sail into the middle of the ocean, or even the metaphorical ocean of technology, digital learning, risk-taking. And those words, I can't, are built on the concepts of fear and disbelief. Fear that something terrible will go wrong. If I try this new tech idea, what if it goes wrong? What if my students start Googling 4-letter words and body parts? What if the internet goes out right when you're supposed to start your webinar? What if the power goes out? What if something bad happens? And disbelief in that this isn't who I am. I'm not the person who takes risks. I'm not a hooray. That's that gal down the hall. That's that teacher who I saw at that conference. That's my principal. That's this person I read about online. I'm not this person. But the amazing thing about those ancient Polynesians that we need to remember is that even though in most organizations, most societies, there's only that top 16% who are the early innovators, who are the folks who are trying out new things, the early adopters. Somehow, they got a vast majority of their people to go from island A to island B. It wasn't just that 16% of the population. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, what did those hoorays say? When they went out, discovered new lands, and came back to their homeland, what did they say to those and heck no's, that other 84%, to change their minds and convince them to become hoorays as well, to jump onto their boat? What can we learn from that to create and share that love of adventure across our own organization? And so today I want to talk to you about how we can virally spread that idea of adventure, or maybe we'll go ahead and call it an adventure, and talk about how we can have these courageous adventures in our own classrooms and own organizations. Now, just as a reminder, you are able to ask questions by going to that goo.gl/slide/MN4HW4. And I already see folks asking questions and saying hello there. I see Olivia Bartlett from California, from Corwin. I see Michael Muhammad from Wisconsin, fellow Midwesterner. Hello there, Mike. And he says it's the first time using Slides Q&A, so I'm excited to see folks digging in. If you're just joining, please feel free to ask questions using that URL, and it'll make this feel a little bit more interactive, and I'll be sure to answer your questions as we go along. You can also up or downvote different questions you see there, so that folks can kind of crowdsource which questions we have time to answer. So let's keep going. So as we're thinking about going on this adventure, we want to think about what direction we want to sail in. The first thing I want to point out is this concept that was published in the National Education Technology Plan. I was really fortunate to be one of the teachers who was on the technical working group revising the National Ed Tech Plan that just came out this year in 2016. And one of the new ideas that was put forward in the National Ed Tech Plan is that we don't only have a digital divide. If you haven't heard of the digital divide before, that concept is basically that there is a socioeconomic divide of the students who have access to technology and those who don't. And we need to bridge that divide so that all students, no matter their background, has the same access to the types of learnings that we think are important for being successful and future ready in a 21st century job environment and society. The digital use divide, however, says that yes, while there is a digital divide and giving kids access to the devices isn't the only problem, we also need to make sure that we are closing the digital use divide, meaning that once students have access to these devices, they are able to use them for higher level thinking and more active learning. If a student has access to a laptop or an iPad, that's great, but they could just be sitting there watching videos all day, doing multiple choice answers, and it's not really transforming or innovating the type of education or learning that they're able to accomplish. However, active use means that the students are creating something. They're engaging in those higher levels of Bloom's, analysis, synthesis, yes, creation. They're interacting with experts. They're having global connections, designing things, coding, in immersive simulations like augmented or virtual reality. And those are the truly transformative types of digital learning that we want to see facilitated by technology use. So when we're giving our kids access to these digital tools and we're embarking into the great unknown of this adventure, sailing across the digital sea, we want to be using this as our compass to make sure, are we heading in the right direction? Are we giving our kids access to devices to do better things, not only different things? And so we want to have a compass to be measuring our digital use. And a great one is the SAMR model. If you're new to technology, this is a really great one to use because it's very, very simple. There's only 4 levels, and it is the acronym SAMR. Also spells out the 4 levels: substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. Substitution is, of course, the lowest level, meaning you're just doing a bait and switch. You were doing worksheets, and now you're doing digital worksheets. You're doing multiple choice on a Scantron, or circle the correct answer, and now we're doing it through clickers or through a multiple choice website. Augmentation might act as a little bit of functional improvement, meaning if you're doing multiple choice on the website, it's automatically scoring and sending your kids answers. So there's a little bit of a speed increase in the feedback loop. But the higher 2 levels, modification and redefinition, allow for significant task redesign, meaning the modification allows you to change what the child's doing and is improving the actual task. So instead of just multiple choice answers, maybe the students are able to create something to show that they understand the concept or topic. Redefinition, as you can see, allows for the creation of new tasks that were impossible without technology. So not only are they creating something to show what they know, but maybe they're sharing it with a worldwide audience and getting authentic feedback. Now, many of us are familiar with the SAMR model because it's usually introduced as that beginning compass to tell us how we're doing in bridging that digital use divide. But if you're ready for something a little bit more complex or a little bit more sophisticated, try also using the technology integration matrix, which was designed by the University of South Florida. Dr. Puentedera's SAMR model is a really great tool, and so is the technology integration matrix. This takes the same concept of SAMR, instead of doing substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. Across this horizontal axis here, it goes from entry to transformation. Also talking about how much it's transforming, the technology is transforming the task or curriculum. But it adds the second dimension, which is the characteristics of the learning environment, from active to goal-directed. So active learning, collaborative, constructive, authentic, and goal-directed. And it gives you a little bit more descriptors about the different types of learning you can do, and focuses both on the teacher action and the student. So if you're ready to get a little bit more in-depth and complex with evaluating your digital use, this year try using the technology integration matrix from USF in addition to the SAMR model, so that you can help either coach yourself or your colleague in increasing their use of technology and bridging that digital use divide. So Michael Muhammad has a question. We're going to go ahead and present it. And he's asking, how can we convince teachers to take risks when they are so worried about making mistakes in the age of increasing educator evaluations? Many who aren't trying in my district have a fear of looking bad in evaluations, not just in front of students. And that's a really great question, Michael. I taught for many years in Chicago public schools where my evaluation was tied to student performance. I also taught in schools that weren't always high performing, and if my students didn't meet AYP, which I know is no longer a thing that we're worried about, but at the time was then. If my students didn't meet that adequate yearly progress on their state exams, then our school was at risk of being closed or losing funding. I was at risk of losing my job. And so there's a lot of different answers to this. Obviously, the easiest one is if your educational leader or your school leader's on board with you, but sometimes that isn't always the case. However, there's always some room for risk. Taking risks and trying new things isn't a black and white binary 0 or 1 thing. We can say in our classrooms, where are the little areas we can begin innovating and taking risks? So maybe if you have a 40-minute math block, you're not able to completely take risks with the entire block. But perhaps if you're doing centers or small group learning and you have 15 minutes where you're doing small group rotations, you can say one of those 3 rotations I'm going to try something new with and see how that's going. Find a small area of your classroom you can use as an innovation, risk-taking petri dish where you can try new things in a safe space without completely transforming your entire practice all at once. Just like we scaffold new ideas with our kiddos, it's okay to scaffold taking risks with ourselves as well. A lot of times, if you don't have a supportive administration or leader or coach, doing so in small pieces and showing that that risk didn't hurt anyone or resulted in high yield transformations or benefits for your kids will allow them to give you more space to take bigger risks down the line. It also allows you to fail in smaller doses so that the failure doesn't seem as monumental. Remember, failure isn't always a bad thing, and we can talk more about this throughout the throughout this webinar, and we're going to. So I don't want to spoil it, but in a bit we're going to talk about why failure isn't the end of the line. So thanks for that question, Michael. And if anyone else is watching, feel free to continue asking questions on goo.gl/slides/mn4hw4, and I'll continue to answer them as we go on. Great question, Michael. So I'm going to go ahead and come back. And the next thing I want to talk about is charting your course. So now that we have a compass for how we're going to measure that we're sailing in the right direction on this adventure, we want to know, where do we want to go? What do we want to transform? Because it's not enough to say that we're going to change things up in our classroom. We need to know what we're changing and why. So what I like to do is identify the problems, the areas of growth. Just like when we look at a student who needs to improve in a certain area, we want to first see where can they improve and why. So with myself and with my colleagues, I like to do something called a gripe jam. What a gripe jam is a chance for you to get all of your problems out on paper and to see what are the challenges you're facing professionally as an educator. To do this, all you're going to need is a pencil and a stack of Post-it notes. The first step you're going to want to do is write down all of your problems, 1 per Post-it note. And if you have 23 problems you think of, then you're going to have 23 Post-it notes, each with their own problem. Instead of just trying to write down your problems without having any kind of situation to consider, sometimes it's easier to consider your problems by first identifying the different situations you find yourself in throughout the day. So for example, perhaps one of your problem or one of the situations you might find yourself in is that you just got to school. You just pulled into the school parking lot and you forgot your lunch. Your parking space is taken if you're lucky enough to work in a school with A, parking lot, or B, your own space. Perhaps you find out that the art teacher is out sick that day, or you are the art teacher and the homeroom teacher's out sick that day, and so you know that your kids are going to be a little bit nutty. Maybe you see a student waiting in the parking lot talking to you about a problem. So you might write down all of the problems you have in that situation in that part of your day. Maybe perhaps the next problem is it's the first teaching period and you're working with your kiddos and you're finding that they had something that happened to them on their way to school. Something happened overnight that is learning. Perhaps they forgot their homework. They didn't get to eat breakfast, so they're a little cranky. Maybe your materials weren't ready for the day or the internet goes out. So write all those problems down on Post-its, 1 per Post-it note. Another issue might be that it's your planning time and you aren't getting to actually plan because you have parent conferences, you have a student who's having a crisis in your classroom, you have a staff meeting that came up. Perhaps you're preparing for a new school year and you're at Target and you want to buy 35 blue folders for your kids and Target only lets you buy 10 folders with your discount. Yes, perhaps that's not an instructional problem, but it is a problem and it is something that we might want to acknowledge. Perhaps you're supporting your colleagues, either officially as a coach or unofficially as a peer mentor or in the staff lounge. And I can imagine a myriad of issues you may have. And finally, we also want to just think about that catch-all of it's the middle of the night, we just can't sleep, and we have a lot of problems that are keeping us up. As you think through all of these situations, you get them on Post-it notes. Take a look at your stack of Post-it notes, however many problems you have, be them 5 or 500. And as you look at them, you might feel a lot of different emotions. Maybe that was cathartic for you because you got them all out on paper, or maybe that was incredibly stress-inducing because now you're seeing, wow, there are a lot of challenges you want to solve as an educator. However, now it's time to go through a protocol and sort them. So what you're going to do is you're going to take all of those Post-it notes and you're going to sort them from left to right in one single file line, from lowest frustration all the way to highest frustration. So all the way to the left, you're going to sort your low frustration problems, going all the way, to the right, going all the way to the left until you have your highest frustration problems. And at the end, you're going to have one single file horizontal line just like this. And yes, you are going to have to make some forced choice decisions. Maybe one problem seemed incredibly painful to you as you were writing it down, just as painful as another, but you're going to have to determine which one's more or less frustrating. After you have them in one single file line, you're going to push them up and down, sort of like a DJ on a mix board, keeping them in their horizontal alignment by how many people the problem affects. So if getting quiet students to participate more in class seems like your least frustrating problem, you're going to keep it all the way to the right, but it seems like it affects a moderate amount of kids. You're going to keep it maybe in the middle. Grading all of the student work is, a more moderately frustrating problem. It ended up in the middle of your lines. You're going to keep it right where it was in line, but you're going to move it down because it affects just you. You're the one at night not getting to watch your television shows, finding out who the Bachelorette shows because you're at your kitchen table grading. Communicating regularly with parents is frustrating, and it also affects all the kids in your class because it makes it so you're not able to reach every parent, so you might push that up a little bit. At the end, step 4, you're going to circle which problems you're most passionate about solving. So regardless of how many kids they affect or people they affect, regardless of how frustrating it is, which of these problems would you really like to dig into? And then once you have that circled, what you can see on your page is you have what we call a scatter plot with a y-axis going vertically up and down, telling you how many people the problem affects, and your x-axis horizontally going left to right, telling you how frustrating the problem is. What I then ask you to do is look in the upper left quadrant, and that's going to show you your most frustrating, most highly affecting problems. These are the problems that really bug you and affect a lot of people. So you focus your eyes there and see if there are any problems in that area that you circled. And you can see in this example, I have circled too many students, too little time. So that might be something I want to dig into. How do I support all these 37 kids I have in my homeroom with only 40 minutes in my math block? Or how do I support my 25 kindergarteners without an aide when I only have this many instructional minutes and I have to transfer and transition them all over the building? So that would be the problem I start with, and that's where I'm going to focus on looking at innovative ways to transform my classrooms with the specific focus of looking at this problem of practice. Once I have that problem of practice identified, then I'm ready to navigate that problem, to try and find ways to dig into solving that in an innovative new way. Just like with your kiddos, once you've identified areas for growth or problems of practice, usually with students we create an individualized education program. But as teachers, sometimes we can benefit from one of these, a TIEP. And instead of calling it an individualized education program, I like to call the teacher IEP the Teacher Innovation Exploration Plan. And just like with our kids, we identify the problem, find ways to try and solve them, create interventions and supports, and create a plan to move forward. We do so with ourselves. So we build out a problem of practice, and we talk about what we've already tried, what interventions we've tried to help solve that problem. So if you have 37 kids in your homeroom, what have you done to try and meet all of their needs? What worked about those solutions? What didn't work? And then it's time to try and investigate new solutions, innovative new solutions that allow us to think outside of the box and try new ways to solve this problem. Here's an example of a TIEP about spending too much time grading student work. I describe why it's a problem. I talk about all of the things I've already tried and why they didn't work and why this is still a problem. And I have a new solution that I'd like to try, which is using Google Forms and Google Sheets to automatically grade student work. I talk about what I'm going to need to accomplish this and the support I'm going to need and from whom. I'm going to create an action plan for myself, due dates, and needs and notes for trying this out. In my book, I outline a list of potential problems that you may have identified from your problem of practice gripe jam. I write down a lot of common problems I saw as a digital learning coordinator working with 17,000 teachers, as an educator who's traveled around the world working with teachers from pre-K through graduate schools in many different countries. And I aggregated those common problems and wrote about them in chapters about assessment, differentiation, communication with families, culture and climate in your classroom or behavior management, and of course, planning. And I wrote about each of these problems with suggested new innovative solutions that you can try out in your classroom and put in your TIEP. In my book, I go through different potential solutions so that you have multiple options to address the problem of practice that you identify. So hopefully, if you dig through the gripe jam, you'll be able to find some new and innovative solutions to try it out. When you're trying out your new and innovative solutions, you want to make sure that you are ready to embrace failure. Just because the innovation or just because the solution is new or an innovation doesn't mean it's going to work the first time. Just like the first time you tried to ride a bike, well, unless you were a phenom and incredibly gifted and good at balance and athleticism, maybe you fell off once or twice. Maybe it took you a while to be brave enough to take off your training wheels and sail without your mom holding your back seat. And that's okay, because as my friend Ken Shelton originally told me, fail is not necessarily a four-letter word, but instead a four-letter acronym that stands for the first attempt in learning. And Ken may or may not have been the first person to share this acronym, but for me, it was the first time I'd heard it. And it was such a freeing moment because I realized that as an educator who thought her only job was to prevent my students from failing, that instead, failure can be a good step in learning. It means that I'm understanding myself as a learner more, I'm learning more about the problem, and I'm becoming more resilient. I'm learning that it's okay when I'm trying new things not to get it the first time. Now, while it's okay to fail, we can't just let that be a scapegoat and rest on our laurels. We can't just say, hey, you know what? Everyone fails. I'm just going to keep on failing and I'm not going to worry about it. Because the true learning isn't just that fail, but as you can see in the first word, first, it denotes a sequence. So when you have that failure, know that it's the first attempt in learning, which means there are going to be subsequent or second attempts in learning. And that second or subsequent attempt in learning is where you have the opportunity to try new things and to iterate on those attempts to get it right another time. So once you identify that problem of practice, you try and find a new and innovative new strategy to solve it, perhaps in my book, perhaps by talking to a colleague or attending a great conference. You're taking risks. You're trying things that perhaps you were a bit afraid to try the first time. Maybe you see yourself as a hooray, someone who tries new things, but there are always parts of us who have that moment of, I'm afraid to sail off in this boat. I'm afraid to venture out into the open sea. I want to stay on the safety of this beach because trying new things can be scary. But when you're digging into that problem of practice you identified, know that there's a reason you're trying something new. That frustration that you had, the people it affects, it's to try and solve that problem so you can help your kids and give them better opportunities. Now, once you are ready to clear some of your problems, once we've solved some of these issues that are plaguing you, once we've taken those Post-it notes, tried some innovative new solutions, failed, sailed, taken risks, and eventually, hopefully, cleared our plate of problems, not all of them, but maybe some of them, we're going to have a little bit more availability in our mind and soul to try something new. And so once those nagging issues have been quieted down, we're ready to sail into the great beyond. We're ready to innovate in ways that perhaps weren't originally problems, but can allow for greater student agency, efficacy, and learning opportunities in our classrooms. One idea and one way that you can sail into the great beyond, while perhaps also solving some of those nagging problems, is to build a student innovation team. Having a student innovation team is just like having a student help desk, a student genius bar, or simply student leader class jobs in your classroom. Sometimes it could be as simple as having an index card that says student leader and putting it in a pocket chart on the wall and saying, Ariel, you are now the student leader in my classroom, which means that you get to help by answering your student colleagues' questions, by collecting work, by plugging in iPads at the end of the day. But you can take this concept and make it something so much more. I like to build a student innovation team in all of the buildings and all of the schools that I work with, whether they're kindergartners or high schoolers. We like to arrange these under the 4 A's that I borrowed from the Apple Distinguished Educator Program, which is that all of the student innovation team members are advocates, authors, ambassadors, and advisors, meaning they advocate in support of digital learning and innovative new learning in their school. They author new online writing media programs to help each other, to help themselves, their colleagues. They're ambassadors. They represent our school if we have a visit, if we have a parent-teacher night, if we have a school board meeting. They're representing the great things that we're doing, but they're also advisors. They're helping teachers and peers become more comfortable with digital learning tools, with new concepts, with new ideas, or even old concepts and old ideas like geometry and reading, writing, and arithmetic. I also list the types of activities student innovation team members might be engaging in, like the blogging, media creation, testing new apps, classroom pilots, and I have them apply for this position just like they'd apply for a job. For kids who already are reading and writing in their daily lives, usually 2nd grade and above, sometimes 3rd grade and above, I have them actually fill out a job application, as you can see here. They talk about why they want to join, what leadership they've demonstrated, why they're interested in these concepts, and they have to get a few ideas for how they could be part of this team. For my students who are pre-writing, I have them draw three pictures instead. They draw a picture of themselves being a leader. They draw a picture of how they see themselves contributing to the team. And they draw a picture of what they think school should look like in the future and ideas that they think they would love to see for transforming their classroom. In both cases, they're having to explain why they're a leader and their ideas for being on the team. That you can also have teacher recommendations. So you can ask them to have other teachers or other adults in their life sign their form or their pictures to show that they endorse them. But once you have the students identified and ready to lead in your student innovation team, they can help you in a lot of ways. In one way they can help you is engaging in some of the new digital tools that you have in your classroom. Not just how do you use it in a general sense, but specific workflow actions, like how do you save an image? How do you export your work and turn it in? How do you use systems like Google Drive or Dropbox? How do you record your voice or create animation? And then sometimes just a general tech guru. I can do any of these things, come ask me a question. And rather than being outnumbered by your class 25-1, now you have 5 to 10 other literal student teachers who can go forth and support their colleagues in doing the everyday tasks that they need to be successful as a student in your classroom. When you're onboarding your students into this system, it's important that they follow 3 important rules as part of the student innovation team. Their first one is not to touch. Even as an adult, I always am guilty of trying to do something for someone rather than teaching them how to do it. So if my friend Ariel says to me, Jenny, how do I upload this picture to my new Schoology account? Sometimes I'll just grab her computer, do it for her, and say, here you go. And then Ariel's happy with me for a few minutes. Her picture's on, she looks cute, but she never really learned how to do it. And the next time she needs to do something like that, she has to come back and ask me again. She's never learned. And so we see our kids doing the same thing. When they're working with one another, we see them reaching over and doing it for them rather than teaching them how to do it. So we teach our kids to keep their hands behind their backs, lean in close, and narrate the procedures or steps for how to accomplish the task or workflow rather than doing it for them. I'm Korean, and in Korea, if any of you have been there before or are Korean, you'll know that we have a word for elderly uncle or respectful elder man, and that is ajashi. And ajashi means sir or uncle. And the ajashis in Korea walk around with their hands behind their back. They're usually very friendly, as you can see here, but they always have their hands behind their backs. I remember my grandfather, my father, my uncles, teachers would always walk around with their hands behind their back. And I never knew why. But as I began talking with my students and telling them to keep their hands behind their back, they'd remembered the stories I told them about my family and my culture. And they were like, oh, you want us to keep our hands behind our backs like an ajashi? And I laughed and I was like, yes, like an ajashi. And so all of the students would go on the student innovation team and help each other, and they would say to themselves, remember, be an ajashi. And in fact, one of my students, Wyatt, came up with a little rhyme to remember not to touch, as you can see here.
No touching. I said that because it rhymes, and I just used when we're in tech, we don't touch other people's tablets.
So I'm not sure if you heard him at the beginning, but Wyatt just said, ajashi, no touchy. And he was one of the student innovation team members, and he would go around to all of his friends who started to touch, and he'd say, ajashi, no touchy. And it became a little bit of a mnemonic device for them to remember. Now, maybe ajashi, no touchy is a little bit juvenile for some of your middle schoolers and high school kids, and you can come up with whatever way you want to remember, but make something meaningful for your kids so they can remember why it's important not to touch each other's screens or keyboards and not to do it for them. I have a lot of different examples of students helping each other, like this one here.
Okay, what kind of photos are you looking for? The Shelly ones. Okay, yeah. Go to Google Drive. And then go, okay, go out. Go to Google Drive. Your real Google Drive. Okay, now look at Shelly with picture. Like that. Move. Wait, that's
Now, what I love about this example is you can see how bad the student wants to touch her screen. He's pointing with his face, he's trying to get in there, but he's being forced to use his procedural language, which is a great language arts and communications lesson in and of itself to describe what she needs to be doing. He needs to really attain to what she's doing and pay attention, and she's actually learning how to go through the task on her own. Golly, I have a lot of videos here of kids doing this on their own, but we're going to keep going for the sake of time. The second rule is to be kind. Now, oftentimes the students who have applied for the student innovation team are the kids who seem to catch up really quickly onto ideas. You tell them once how to do something and they remember that click workflow immediately. And sometimes those students don't have the most patience for their colleagues and peers who need a second, third, fourth, sometimes fifth time around set of instructions. And developmentally or emotionally, sometimes that impatience manifests in not the nicest language, facial expressions, or sometimes body language, or huzz, or smacking lips. And so what we want to remind our student innovation team members is to remember to be kind. When you don't get something the first time, I remind them, I don't smack my lips at you. I don't roll my eyes. I don't call you stupid or slow. And I don't have side comments. I remain smiling and I continue to go over it until you feel comfortable. And I remind them that this is part of their job as a student leader. The third thing is really related to that, and that's to go slow. Sometimes, again, the kids who are part of the student innovation team get things very quickly. And that also manifests in them speaking very quickly and not understanding why their peer can't do it faster. So they determined that to go slow, they need to do one step at a time. When you saw the student giving the directions there, he would pause and give his colleague a chance to do what he had said. The reason why he was pausing was because he was counting to 3 in his head. So when he said, go to your drive, he was counting 1, 2, 3 in his head, giving her 3 beats to do what he said. That 1, 2, 3 is a mental reminder for him to stop and allow her to do it. That 1, 2, 3 allows her to know that she's always going to have time. She doesn't need to feel stressed or rushed to follow his directions because he's going to move on without her if she doesn't. My older kids count to 3 in their head, but my kindergartners actually count to 3 out loud under their breath. You'll see the 5-year-old saying, click on drive, and then they'll say 1, 2, 3. And actually, developmentally, that's great because their peer hears them give them that 3 count and knows, okay, I have time. I'm okay. I can keep going. So give them different tips and clues so that they can be successful members of the leadership of your classroom. And in this way, you're also giving them a little crash course on how to be a student teacher, literally. Now, as a student ambassador, student advisor, and also student advocate, they're going to be doing a lot of this don't touch, go slow, be kind. But they're also going to be authors as part of your student innovation team. They're going to be creating new things both to help their friends, maybe screencasts and videos about how to use an app or try a new strategy. But they're also going to be building new things to share with the world. In this case, one of my students, Sincere, built a blueprint for a wireless projector. It's top secret, so he won't allow me to actually show you the schematics. Otherwise, you'd have to sign your life away, like you can see here on this non-disclosure agreement that he built into his schematics. But he did say I could tell you that he built it and that it's going to be selling for $999 when he grows up and gets a patent. But for the things that I am able to share, you can go ahead and take a look here at the bit.ly/studentsrule. It's a YouTube playlist of examples of things that my student innovation team members, as well as other students from other innovation teams, have been able to build as authors, leading innovation in their classrooms. It's also really powerful to bring your kids out and allow them to present to the world around them, to let them tell their story and be the voices at educational conferences and events that don't just say, hey, this is what students are learning from an adult perspective, but can actually say, hey, this is what I'm learning and here's why I think it's important from the voice of the students themselves. Our kids love going to events and they love sharing their perspective on the future of education. So as you build your student innovation team and as it gets off the ground, think about how you can share your story and bring your kids with you to share that story to either staff meetings, district events, or even state and national events. You'll be surprised by how much these groups want to accept proposals when they're from students versus adults. One way you can start creating student-led learning in your classroom today, or perhaps in your school district, is by doing a little something called app speed sharing. App speed sharing is something that I first saw in Auburn, Maine, at the Leveraging Learning Conference in 2012. Essentially what it is a student is sitting at a table with devices or tools out for each teacher who comes in, and each teacher who comes in gets a number. They sit at their table, perhaps table 5 or table 4, depending on their number, and the student has 5 minutes to make them fall in love with their app.
Oh, that's your iPad? Everybody's on home screen. Okay, everybody's on the home screen. Now, first thing you do is create a cartoon. Wait, by the way, my name is Maverick. I'm sorry. Okay, you could either create a cartoon or
So I love how Maverick is so professional. He sits down, he tells everyone to get on Toontastic, he's getting them all set up, he's telling them how to use it, and he realizes, oh, I need to introduce myself. I'm the teacher in this session. So he goes, by the way, my name is Maverick. I'm so sorry. And then picks up without missing a beat. And I love that student agency and confidence that it builds in our kids, but also, as you saw, the teachers are so leaned in and engaged. It's hard to be sitting back and bored in a staff meeting when you have a 5th grader, a kindergartner, even a high school student telling you why the tool or strategy is transformative for their learning. So another thing your kids can do is find things that you're doing in the classroom, find the risks that you're taking that they feel like has created a transformative moment, and then invite them into that staff meeting and have the teachers rotate in those 5-minute speed stations to tell them why that was so powerful for their learning. They can also do it with each other. So if you're one 7th grade teacher trying out some new ideas in your science class, invite the kids from the other period to come in and learn from your class and rotate through stations to find out why those tools are incredible. Invite some 6th graders down into a kindergarten class or some kindergartners up to a 6th grade class. Think about how you can share those voices and amplify your kids. Now, as you're trying out these new ideas, sometimes it's hard to assess and see how your kids are learning. So think about new and innovative ways to give kids feedback, like badging. Badging isn't a new idea. If you think about it, we did badging when we were kids, and Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. You got badges for starting a fire when you were supposed to at a campground, for going rowing in a canoe, for being a friend and getting your friendship badge. But if you think about it, we're still badging today as an adult. Anytime you get a subway card and you become a frequent flyer, you can like earn your frequent subway badge. Flying different airlines and becoming silver, gold, platinum, and getting to go through the fancy pants line at the airport, you're earning badges. And that feels really good, even as an adult, to say, I've had this accomplishment. And it actually gets you to engage in behaviors that you might not otherwise. Maybe you are buying that ticket on a United flight that's $25 extra versus the Southwest flight because you really want to earn more miles on United. And if you think about this, trying to get our kids to do what we want to do is part of what school's about, but also getting them to do things that they might not initially recognize as good for them. And so creating badging systems through a lot of free platforms like Open Badges, Credly, or even learning management systems like Schoology can be really powerful. And building that intrinsic motivation through either prizes, saying, hey, earning these badges can get you things like more privileges in school, better access to digital tools, more autonomy in the classroom. Or social motivation, just getting your kids geeked up about it and seeing the badges or stickers on each other's laptops or lockers and saying, oh man, Ariel has 6 badges at level 4 already. I want to get there too. That's really great. Think about the games your kids are playing where they're trying to earn achievements and they're spending hours and hours to level up. They're playing Pokemon Go till late at night when they should be doing their homework or going to sleep because they want to get to level 12 because all their friends are on level 11. They're walking that extra mile to hatch an egg so they can have more Pokemon in their Pokédex than their friends. What if we could bottle that motivation into our classrooms through things that are gamified, like badges, and allow our kids to feel that same joy and achievement for doing something in school, like finding the area of a 6-sided polygon, just like for finding the 6 Pokemon in their Pokedex. That would be pretty gnarly. Now, as you're going on your adventure, you want to be consistently reflecting. You want to think about how are you going? Where have you come from? How has time improved? You can do this in a lot of different ways. You can do it digitally, through blogs. You can be writing it down. You can be sharing questions on Twitter. But there's a lot of different ideas for reflecting. Just make sure that you're doing it. Now, I hope that you had a really good time on this webinar, learned some new ideas. As I said, There's a lot of this expanded and much, much more in my book, Courageous Adventures. I have that list of dozens of problems of practice I saw teachers suffering from throughout the nation, around the world, and suggested innovative new solutions for them. I have more templates about the Grape Jam, the Teacher Innovation Exploration Plan, or that TIEP in there. I have new strategies for gamification, for badging, all written about in this book, as well as the strategies for building your own student innovation team. It is on pre-sale now. If you want to purchase it, you can save 25% off by using the code N16678 at checkout. And just go to the Corwin website to do so, which you can see at the bottom of this screen. Additionally, you want to make sure that you download your certificate of completion by going to the following website or scanning this QR code so that you can prove that you were here, you saw it, you did it, and you are a little better off, hopefully, than an hour ago. I thank you guys for joining me today. I had a lot of fun sharing these ideas with you. I'll be staying tuned on the Pledge into Tech hashtag to see if anyone else has any other questions or ideas. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Miss Magiera, where I'd be happy to answer questions or engage with conversations with any of you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank
That was
you.
awesome, and I love all of the videos that you showed, and I mean the idea of the Grape Jam and the TIEP. I mean, thank you so much for all of those super helpful, practical things that we can use. There was one more question that Michael had on the Google Slides Q&A form. He said, "Is the student innovation team, is that part of the school day, or is that an extracurricular?"
Oh, great question. It could be both, either or, yes and. So essentially, the student innovation team can either be built into the fabric of your classroom. You could have them meet before or after school. You can have them meet during lunch. I like to do Tech Tuesday lunches with my kiddos so that they bring their lunch to my classroom and we go over new ideas and have a meeting at lunchtime, sort of like a book talk at lunch. But you could also make it an extracurricular, which I know a lot of schools do as well. Some schools actually make it an entire class where they have an entire elective you can take in middle or high school where you can be part of a tech leadership team as well.
Cool. All right, cool. Thank you. All right, so that finishes up today's webinar, and be sure to join in next week at 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern, and Tom Whitby and Stephen Anderson are going to be talking about the relevant educator, so we're really excited about that. Thank you again, Jenny, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thank you.